With growing concerns about banks, their failures, and questions about how they invest, it might be a good time to look at ESG, or so-called woke investing.
ESG is a way of investing that takes into consideration governance factors, environmental factors, and social factors.
Big financial institutions increasingly use their power to try to force investors to support their social and environmental causes. Now, some are pushing back.
I mean, look, I moved $800 million in the last year.
When Republicans took control of the House in January, electing their leader was a chaotic process.
The Honorable Kevin McCarthy is duly elected.
A group of rising voices inside the GOP had a major impact.
We just were tired of the status quo.
Today, we hear from the new leader of the House Freedom Caucus.
It was once a tale of two cities until a feat of engineering brought them together.
Somebody wrote that this could be considered a symbol of resurrection in the city.
We visit Medellin in Colombia, where cable cars became a connection to prosperity.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. Experts say banks in the U.S. and around the globe are facing their most serious crisis since 2008. That's focusing attention on a controversial strategy many financial institutions have been engaging in, ESG. It stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. Some call it woke investing. It means pushing or even forcing others to support policy positions on issues like the environment. Now there's growing backlash. That's our cover story. We start in San Francisco, home of the largest environmental, social, and governance, or ESG, mutual fund company, Parnassus Investments. It manages about $40 billion in assets. Marian McIndoe heads ESG stewardship at Parnassus.
ESG is a way of investing that takes into consideration governance factors, environmental factors, and social factors into the investment decision making.
To understand the conflict at hand, it helps to know a little background about environmental, social, and governance investing. As a term, ESG seems to have originated at the United Nations in a 2004 report, Who Cares Wins? Recommendations by the financial industry to better integrate environmental, social, and governance issues. It frequently boils down to big banks and investment firms using their power to support left-leaning positions on social and environmental issues like global warming. It rarely, if ever, equates to promoting conservative views. So does a company have to make up its mind what kind of investors it wants and which ones it's okay not to have?
No, I think we all want the same thing, which is companies that can sustain and generate returns for the long term. We're all on the same team.
McIndoe differentiates between what Parnassus does, searching for wise investments with places that follow environmental, social, and governance principles, and something called impact investing, which may include pressuring customers into action.
Impact investing is when a fund is pursuing specific environmental or social objectives through their investments. ESG investing is about incorporating environmental, social, and governance risks and opportunities into decision-making to promote value.
She says Parnassus has advocated for new government rules requiring companies to report their climate change policies. But she says Parnassus doesn't do impact investing, trying to change policies of investors. But many other companies do, and that's a problem, says John Schroeder.
I get your ability as an independently owned company to push the policies that you like. Just don't force it down my throat.
Schroeder is Louisiana's state treasurer, managing a $64 billion cash flow. He noticed the environmental, social, and governance hard sell, he says, shortly after he took office in late 2017. It arrived in the form of letters from Citibank and Bank of America.
It was right after one of the horrific shootings in our country, and these banks wanted to basically force us to have certain policies in Louisiana.
What kind of policies were they
It
suggesting?
was over gun licensing and permitting, and you had to be 21 to carry.
Was there an implicit or explicit threat that if you didn't do something, something would happen?
No, I guess it's not a threat as much as they want you, we'll do business with you if you do A, B, C.
Coercion also came from the biggest asset manager in the world, he says, and a fierce advocate of environmental, social, and governance investing, BlackRock, led by CEO Larry Fink.
We're one of the fastest growing companies related to decarbonization.
They were opposed to the fossil fuel industry, which is where Louisiana is probably almost the biggest industry we have in our state. You know, I met with my team. I said, look, all things equal, I don't want to do business with this company. There's got to be somebody else that we can go do business with that doesn't push the same environmental policy that this company pushes.
Schroeder and his team made a big decision. They flipped the ESG script. Louisiana began requiring the big financial players to pass a test.
We actually put out a questionnaire, and you answer a couple questions, and it's yes or no.
Louisiana's questionnaire identifies 3 deal breakers. Does the company have policies to boycott Israel, restrict firearms or discriminate against those who own them, or restrict business with anyone in the fossil fuel industry?
Answer the questions. You answer the questions, you can negotiate with the state. You don't answer the questions, I take that as you didn't want to do business with the state of Louisiana.
When a company doesn't respond with 3 no's, Schroeder takes the state's business elsewhere.
I mean, look, I moved $800 million in the last year.
If money talks, then the chatter is growing louder. The idea has caught on in Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, North Carolina, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Texas, and West Virginia, all states looking to fight what they call woke investing.
Combined, I think there's like 7 states that have moved about $5 billion just out of BlackRock. And you'll see more and more. When we started moving money, that moved the conversation. And now people pay more attention to it.
But did someone place a call to BlackRock and go, just so you know?
No, BlackRock was very clear on their position. And look, it's his company. It's their company. They can have whatever policy they want, which is fine. I don't like their policy, so I don't want to do business with them.
First time in my professional career, attacks are now personal. They're trying to demonize issues.
BlackRock and CEO Fink declined our interview request, as did some of the other big ESG players. But it's clear they're taking note.
The backlash, it's public. We lost about $4 billion of flows from various states. But in long-term flows last year, we were awarded $400 billion. On the other hand, let me be clear. I'm taking this very seriously. We are trying to address the misconceptions.
Fink has argued in public appearances that he's not against fossil fuel, which he says is a recognized necessity for decades to come. When we visited Parnassus in San Francisco, McIndoe was about to head to a meeting on the East Coast with other companies to discuss what to do about the impact of ESG opposition. What is your take on the backlash against ESG?
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I think that we have more in common than what divides us on these issues. Even if you don't believe in climate change, which I do, you can believe in climate change regulation and the impact that that's going to have as we transition away as a globe away from a fossil fuel-based system into a system that has a broader mix of energy.
Do you see a time where that term, if it's gotten maybe out of context or been given sort of a bad connotation, whether deserve it or not, that maybe companies will do the same thing but not call it that?
I think that's possible. I have seen companies changing the names of their reports to not say ESG report, to say corporate responsibility report or impact report, to get away from using those triggering words.
Whether financial companies are rethinking their strategies or simply the messaging, the epic clash over investment cash has taken a prominent place on America's balance sheet.
So they choose their policy on environmental, social, and governance issues. I want that same ability afforded to me that they're taking. If you're going to boycott our businesses, then we're going to boycott you.
President Biden installed a rule urging private retirement plans to factor in ESG when deciding where to invest money for 150 million Americans. Congress tried to reverse that, but Biden recently used his first veto to keep the pro-ESG policy in place. Ahead on Full Measure, shaking up the Republican Party. In Congress, there's a new sheriff in town since Republicans won the majority in the House of Representatives. But among them, there are fractures as the more conservative Freedom Caucus challenges the larger GOP membership on what it means to be Republican. The most visible face of the Freedom Caucus appeared during January's epic battle over whether Republicans would elect establishment leader Kevin McCarthy as their speaker.
No member-elect having received a majority of the votes cast, a speaker has not been elected.
Freedom Caucus members held out through 14 votes, winning promises on a number of points to change the way the House operates before ultimately backing McCarthy on vote number 15.
The Honorable Kevin McCarthy of the state of California is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives.
You know, my father always told me, it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Congressman Scott Perry of Pennsylvania is chairman of the Republican Freedom Caucus. What role did the Freedom Caucus play in this fuss over who was going to be speaker and what resulted from all of that?
So the vast majority of the members that opposed Kevin McCarthy, at least initially during the speaker's vote, were from the Freedom Caucus, and essentially we just were tired of the status quo. So what does that mean to people? Literally, we were going to start out with the same set of rules running this Congress under Republicans that Nancy Pelosi just left, right? So we fought to make this place more responsive and representative of the American people.
What are some of the priorities you have on the committees you'll be serving on?
For every dollar we take in revenue, we're spending $1.29. So our focus, my focus, no matter what committee on, remains in that realm, because that's increasing inflation, that's increasing the cost of living. Well, how about the woke policy that is destroying our military? How about the policy that allows the FBI and the Department of Justice to put threat tags on individuals for simply going to their school board meeting? That can all be tied to funding. So not only can we reduce the cost of the federal government and the overspending, the $1.29 spent for every dollar taken in, but also the policies associated with them. And we do that by saying, you don't get any money for that policy anymore. You might steal it from somewhere else. Your focus is supposed to be on law enforcement, but if you want to spend it on diversity, equity, inclusion, you're going to have to get it from somewhere else because we're not going to fund it anymore. That's what we can do.
Republicans have already put the focus on President Biden's son, Hunter. He had a controversial sweetheart deal, making more than $1 million with an allegedly corrupt Ukrainian gas company, Burisma. That at the same time his dad was vice president and the lead on Ukraine issues. Joe Biden later admitted he got a Ukrainian prosecutor fired who is investigating Hunter's company.
If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Biden says it was the prosecutor who was corrupt. If Republicans are going to look into matters of Ukraine and President Biden's son and his connections to Ukraine, it seems to me they're going to need to do a good job explaining why they're doing that, other than for political reasons.
Right.
I think Americans look at this and it just sounds like one side's going after the other.
Yeah. And it often does, and I think in some cases it actually is that. But in this case, I think why it's important is look, we've got a wide open southern border where it needs the attention of the chief executive. You take that and you say, well, how does Ukraine fit into that? If we're spending money in Ukraine, we don't have it to spend there. And if we're spending money in Ukraine to distract from other things that might have happened in Ukraine, what other things might have happened? When I talk about his son, the President of the United States' son, Is the president being extorted for those actions, and are the American taxpayers paying the bill? That's why it's important to know. We're not making any accusations, but it's important to clear the record to make sure that what we're doing in Ukraine is for the right reason and not for some other reason that is unseen to the American people. As a mission statement, the Freedom Caucus stands for the millions upon millions of Americans who feel like Washington, D.C. doesn't hear them, has left them behind, doesn't have their backs, and doesn't advocate for them. So we stand for open, accountable government, the way it was supposed to be run, the way the founders wanted it to be done, so that every representative gets a voice and can represent their people and are unafraid of the influences of Washington, D.C. and the corrupting components of it. We're here to save the republic.
The Freedom Caucus recently called to end Biden's plans to cancel student debt, to take back unspent COVID funds, as well as $80 billion in IRS funding provided in the Inflation Reduction Act. The White House responded by calling the proposal a five-alarm fire that would endanger public safety, raise costs for families, undermine workers, weaken national security, and hurt seniors. When we come back.
It's meant to instill anxiety among my colleagues.
An anxiety-inducing fashion statement in Congress. Typically, when you spend more than you make, you go into debt. When Congress spends more tax money than it has, it adds to the national debt, which now stands somewhere north of $31 trillion. One debt-conscious member of Congress has invented a constant reminder while making a fashion statement. It's a pin that shows the debt growing in real time. Here's Republican Tom Massey.
We had a week off, and I spent 3 days making this. It logs on to U.S. Treasury's website once a day because they publish the debt once a day. And then it tries to guess what the debt is from one day to the next. And it's meant to instill anxiety among my colleagues.
Okay.
That's why I'm wearing it, and it's working out great. Like, they look at it out of curiosity, and then they have horror, and then they realize they're the ones who are doing this. And then when they get over that, they're very jealous, and they want one of these.
Are you going to make one for other members?
I think I'm going to have to make some,
okay.
Because it's been pretty popular. You just charge it with a regular iPhone charger.
How did you make it, in simple terms?
Well, the case is roof flashing that I found in my basement from when I built my roof. And then it's just a small microprocessor and a lithium battery and a screen. This screen could actually show TV commercials. But I wanted to make it look like something from the 80s, so I came up with this font that looks like LEDs. So that it looks like this thing has been running for 30 or 40 years.
You are an MIT guy.
This is what I used to do for a living.
Spending during the COVID pandemic helped send the national debt soaring ever higher. Experts say the debt has ballooned by 430% over the last 20 years. After a break, we're off to Colombia to see the practical purpose behind a top tourist attraction. Coming up next week on Full Measure, the controversy over solar farms replacing America's food farms. Are we risking a food shortage in the rush to fuel the green energy push? Both sides next week on Full Measure. Medellin, Colombia has been called a forbiddingly steep city with hills separating the rich from the poor until an innovation joined the two. As Scott Newman found out, the solution was in the air.
Tucked away in these mountains, the Colombian city of Medellin. For a long time, the 2.5 million residents here lived in two very different worlds. The one in the valley, bustling, thriving, affluent. While up in the hills, hardships and exclusion. Those living on these precarious slopes often felt ostracized, and these neighborhoods known as barrios became a hotbed for poverty and crime. Then something changed when leaders had a lofty idea. A series of cable cars unlike any in the world that would connect the remote with the rest.
Somebody wrote that this could be considered a symbol of resurrection in the city.
I think so.
That's not going too far?
No, this is right.
Tomás Elejalde is the general manager of Metro Medellin and oversaw the inception of this project almost 20 years ago.
Some of the neighborhoods years ago were what people considered no-go zones.
Yes, you're right. This is the motivation for me to say that these systems gives the people these opportunities to connect them with the city, with the opportunities with the city, and therefore we have a very, very high social impact.
You want to get on one?
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
We go for a ride on one of two lines that serve this sector, carrying around 40,000 passengers a day. There are 10 other lines in the city, cutting a typical 2-hour commute by more than half.
So when you ride it, what do you think about?
You see the evolution, you see the changes. For 18 years, you saw maybe houses without covers, without roofs, for example. And now you see that the people really have an improvement in the incomes, in the opportunities to connect with jobs.
Colombians living here used to walk, drive, ride, or take buses, should they be willing to navigate these steep streets. Now their ride, which lets them see all of their city, includes seeing opportunity.
Yes, it's a very accessible mode of transportation for all of us, for all citizens.
Yes, I use it for all my transportation, for work, to my house, for everything.
This system may have a successful history, but it's the future that they're thinking about, since they say it opens up opportunities to build everything from police stations to grocery stores to pharmacies where they previously didn't exist.
Other countries are now also taking note, from Brazil to Bolivia, pursuing the simple idea with a serious impact.
This metro cable helped transform one of the most dangerous cities to one of the most innovative. Is that true?
The gangs of Pablo Escobar, for example, were grown,
some of the gang members under Pablo Escobar
these gangs and
used to operate right up here.
Yes, this is, and you don't find this time. This is a big opportunity and a solution for the people.
It's a ride bringing residents beyond a commute. It's showing them, he says, that the sky really is the limit. For Full Measure, I'm Scott Thuman in Medellin, Colombia.
I've definitely got to go there and try that. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you next week.